All right, ready for a deep dive? Buckle up, because this one goes straight into a true crime saga that had the whole nation on the edge of their seats. We're talking about Patty Hearst, the heiress, the hostage, and, well, some even said a revolutionary.
Imagine this. It's February 4th, 1974, Berkeley, California. It's evening, and 19-year-old Patty Hearst, granddaughter of the incredibly powerful newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst, she's at home in her apartment with her fiancé when suddenly their world just explodes. A group of armed intruders burst in, brutally overpower everyone, and abduct Patty. But these weren't your average criminals. This was the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA, a radical group, and their goal: nothing short of overthrowing the entire U.S. government. And violence. Not afraid of it.
Just a year earlier, they were linked to the assassination of Marcus Foster, the Oakland superintendent of schools. The SLA, their methods, they were as twisted as their aims. With Patty, they didn't want a simple ransom. They wanted to break her, erase her identity, and mold her into their weapon, kept her isolated, subjected her to, well, you can imagine, psychological and physical torment. The terror, the confusion, the fight for survival she must have been going through.
It's unimaginable. Meanwhile, the entire nation was on edge. The SLA started releasing audio tapes, and Patty's voice, once so vibrant, now sounded flat, emotionless, reciting the SLA's propaganda. Then this bizarre demand. Millions in food donations from the Hearst family, a twisted ransom, right? The media, they went crazy, every new development plastered all over newspapers and TV screens. And then in April, a security camera in a San Francisco bank captures an image that sends shockwaves through the country. It's Patty Hearst, now calling herself Tanya, wielding an assault rifle during an SLA bank robbery. The heiress had transformed into a gun-toting revolutionary. So the question everyone's asking, was this a terrified hostage pushed to the brink, or had she really been brainwashed? Was she a willing participant in the SLA's cause?
That image is just seared into my memory. It's hard to reconcile that image with the Patty Hearst before the kidnapping.
Right. And the story doesn't end there. Patty participated in another armed robbery, this time at Mel's Sporting Goods in Los Angeles. It turns into a shootout with police, broadcast live on television. The SLA safe house goes up in flames, 6 members die, but Patty, nowhere to be found. She vanished along with several other SLA members. For over a year, Patty Hearst was a fugitive, on the run with the SLA. Bank robberies, bombings, carjackings, they didn't stop. They were like this phantom menace, always one step ahead of the authorities. You'd think it was a movie plot, but this was all too real. And finally, in September of 1975, the FBI cornered Patty in San Francisco. Her arrest was a media spectacle, cameras flashing as she's taken into custody, but her face, defiant, raising her fist in a revolutionary salute. The kidnapped heiress, the urban guerrilla, was now a defendant, facing serious charges.
Okay, so much to unpack here. It's a story that just grabs you and doesn't let go.
Yeah.
You laid out this incredibly intense chain of events, the kidnapping, the transformation, the crimes. It's just mind-blowing. But what was the SLA really after? How did they think they could actually overthrow the government?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The SLA's ideology was this bizarre mix of, revolutionary slogans, Marxist-Leninist ideas, and this fascination with symbolism. They saw themselves as warriors fighting against oppression, against capitalism, against, what they perceived as the evils of American society. But their vision, it was incredibly vague, and their actions, they often seemed more about putting on a shield than actually having a strategy. They wanted a revolution, but their methods were more like random acts of violence than any kind of coherent plan for change.
You mentioned their fascination with symbolism. I mean, the name itself, the Symbionese Liberation Army, that 7-headed cobra logo, it's all very dramatic, but also kind of, nonsensical.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes this case so fascinating, I think. You had this group of deeply troubled individuals, some with criminal backgrounds, others from, relatively privileged lives. Their motives were a mess, tangled up with personal grievances, political frustrations, and this craving for notoriety.
Yeah. It sounds like they were more focused on causing chaos than actually accomplishing any real change. But let's circle back to Patty. You said she was on the run for over a year. So what was she doing during that time? Was she really a full-fledged member of the SLA, or just a terrified hostage forced to do whatever they said?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's the question that fueled this intense debate during her trial. The prosecution, they argued she was a willing participant, someone who could embrace the SLA's cause and actively took part in their crimes. They pointed to her actions, right? Her proficiency with a weapon during the bank robbery, her defiant statements in those audio tapes, and the fact that she had chances to escape but didn't.
And what about the defense? I'm guessing they argued she was brainwashed.
Exactly. They claimed Patty was subjected to such intense psychological and physical manipulation that she basically became a different person. They argued she was under duress, that her actions weren't a reflection of her true beliefs or intentions.
So you have these two completely opposite narratives. How could a jury possibly make sense of it all?
Well, that's where the psychiatric testimony became crucial. The trial, it basically turned into this battle of the experts. Psychiatrists for both the prosecution and the defense, they presented their opinions on Patty's state of mind, the validity of the brainwashing defense, and the whole concept of free will versus coercion.
Now, so we have this incredibly complex case set against this backdrop of social unrest, featuring this radical group with this bizarre ideology and this young heiress caught in the middle of it all. What happened next? Where did this tangled web lead?
Well, the next chapter is the trial itself, which was a media frenzy unlike anything the legal world had ever seen. It was a clash of personalities, legal strategies, and scientific theories, all under this intense scrutiny of the public eye.
This is already so much to process. It makes you think, what would any of us do under that kind of pressure? Could someone really be forced to act against their will?
And that's exactly what the trial and the eventual verdict would try to determine. It wasn't just about Patty Hearst's fate. It would set a legal precedent for how the justice system would handle future cases involving claims of brainwashing and coerced actions. The implications, they were huge.
It's clear this story is far from over. We've only just scratched the surface. Hang in there, because we're going to continue our deep dives into the Patty Hearst saga in just a bit.
The trial, it was captivating, a real drama. This legal battle, it was going to decide Patty Hearst's future. And the courtroom, it became a stage, and the players, larger than life. You had the defense, led by F. Lee Bailey, already famous for his courtroom theatrics, and his success defending high-profile clients.
Oh, F. Lee Bailey, what a character. The man was practically a celebrity lawyer, so what was his strategy in this case?
Bailey, he was a master at manipulating public perception, and he was determined to present Patty as the victim. His whole argument, it hinged on this concept of brainwashing. It was a relatively new and controversial idea at the time. He wanted to convince that jury that Patty had been so completely manipulated by the SLA that she wasn't responsible for her actions.
The brainwashing defense. Yeah, I remember reading about that. It almost seems like something out of a spy movie.
It was definitely groundbreaking and pretty risky. The prosecution, though, they weren't buying it. They saw Patty as a willing participant, a spoiled rich girl who'd chosen to join the SLA's criminal enterprise.
So how did they try to prove that? Aside from the fact that she was, caught on camera with a gun during that bank robbery, what evidence did they present?
The prosecution, they are meticulous. They laid out this case based on Patty's actions and her statements after that kidnapping. They focused on her transformation into Tanya, her apparent enthusiasm for carrying out the SLA's demands, and the fact that she chose to stay with them even when she had chances to escape. They also introduced evidence that really seemed to contradict that brainwashing defense. There was this one small detail. It became a turning point in the trial. An Olmec monkey necklace.
Wait, an Olmec monkey? That's a pretty specific detail. What's the significance of that?
Well, the necklace, it had been given to Patty by William Wolfe. He was an SLA member, and she later claimed that he had raped her. But the fact that she kept this gift from someone she claimed to hate, it was powerful evidence for the prosecution.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge contradiction. If she had been brainwashed into hating him, why keep a token of his affection?
Exactly. It cast doubt on her claims of being this helpless victim, and the jury, they picked up on that. It became a symbol of all the inconsistencies in her story.
So you have this really intense courtroom battle. The defense arguing brainwashing, the prosecution poking holes in Patty's story with these seemingly small but crucial details. It must have been incredibly difficult for that jury to decide who to believe.
Oh, absolutely. That jury was bombarded with information, with all these conflicting expert opinions, with emotional pleas from both sides. It was a case that forced them to really grapple with, some fundamental questions about free will, about responsibility, and the power of manipulation.
You mentioned earlier that the SLA, they had this grand plan to overthrow the government. But it seems like they were more about publicity stunts and, random acts of violence than any kind of real revolution.
That's a valid point. The SLA was a group of individuals with these really personal motivations. While they espoused this revolutionary ideology, their actions, they often seemed chaotic, self-serving. It's almost as if they were living out this twisted fantasy instead of enacting some well-thought-out plan.
So they might have talked a big game about revolution, but their actions didn't really back it up. It's almost like they were more interested in the spectacle than in actually changing anything.
Right. And it raises an interesting question about the role of the media in this whole saga. The media coverage, it was relentless. It just fueled the public's fascination with this case, and maybe even played into the SLA's desire for attention.
That's a good point. I mean, the media has always had this powerful influence on how we perceive events. In this case, it was no exception. The images and narratives that were circulated, they undoubtedly shaped public opinion. And who knows, maybe even influenced the jury's perception of Patty.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how the case would have played out in today's world. With the rise of social media, the 24/7 news cycle, would the outcome have been the same? Would Patty have been, portrayed as a victim or a villain?
Yeah, those are questions we can only speculate about. But let's get back to the trial. What was the atmosphere like in that courtroom?
Oh, it was electric. The courtroom was packed every day. Reporters, spectators, even celebrities, everyone wanted to be a part of this captivating real-life drama. It was like watching a movie unfold, but in real time.
Okay, so after all this back and forth, all the testimony and evidence, what was the verdict?
After 12 long hours of deliberation, which tells you how difficult this decision was, the jury found Patty Hearst guilty. Guilty of armed bank robbery and use of a firearm during a felony.
Guilty, wow. That must have been devastating for her and her family. But you mentioned earlier that she was pardoned. When did that happen?
Patty was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but she ended up serving less than 2. Her sentence was commuted by President Carter in 1979, and she was later given a full pardon by President Clinton in 2001.
So even after the trial, even after her release, the controversy continued. It's interesting to me how this case still fascinates people, decades later. What do you think it is about the Patty Hearst story that continues to captivate us?
I think it's a combination of factors. It's a story that touches on so many universal themes. The allure of rebellion, the fear of being controlled, the question of whether we are truly masters of our own destinies. Patty Hearst, she was this unlikely revolutionary, this symbol of privilege who seemingly transformed into a symbol of radicalism. And that transformation, whether it was genuine or coerced, it continues to intrigue us.
It makes you think, what would I do in that situation? It's chilling to imagine being stripped of your identity, forced to betray everything you believe in. It challenges our assumptions about who we are and what we're capable of.
Exactly. And the fact that there's no easy answer, no clear-cut right or wrong, that's what makes this story so compelling. It forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the society we live in.
It really makes you question the nature of free will and the power of manipulation. I mean, can someone truly be brainwashed into committing acts they would never otherwise consider? What are the boundaries between victimhood and culpability?
Those are profound questions, and the Patty Hearst case, it doesn't offer any easy answers. It's a story that continues to spark debate and challenge our understanding of human behavior.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's amazing how a case from over 50 years ago can still feel so relevant today.
Absolutely. The Patty Hearst saga, it's a reminder that the past is never truly past. The themes of power, manipulation, and the struggle for individual agency, they continue to resonate with us today.
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it. It makes you think about the forces that shape our lives, the choices we make, and the consequences we face.
Yeah, it reminds us that the human experience, it's full of complexities, contradictions, and gray areas. There are rarely easy answers or simple solutions.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still so much to explore. Stay tuned as we continue our journey into the Patty Hearst saga and delve deeper into the aftermath of the trial. Through all of this, it's the media frenzy around Patty Hearst that I can't get over. It's like, this story was made for the tabloids. I mean, you've got wealth, celebrity, radical politics. It's got it all.
Oh, absolutely. The media coverage was just relentless. Patty Hearst's kidnapping, it became a national obsession. Every little thing, every twist and turn was amplified by the newspapers, magazines, television. This was the beginning of the 24-hour news cycle, and let me tell you, this story had everything to keep the public glued to their screens.
It's hard to imagine a story more made for that kind of coverage. You've got the granddaughter of, a media mogul kidnapped by this group calling themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army. I mean, come on, it almost sounds made up.
Right. And the media, they played a huge role in shaping how everyone saw it. Those images we talked about, Patty Hearst with that weapon, her changing into Tanya, what she said in those SLA tapes, the SLA crafted all of that for maximum impact, to get the most publicity.
So they were using the media, in a way, as this tool to get their message out there, even if their message was often, kind of all over the place. But how did all that media attention actually affect the trial?
Oh, it was a circus. I mean, a full-blown media circus. Reporters and cameras everywhere, all trying to get access. The pressure on that jury must have been immense, with every single move they made being analyzed. The judge even had to come up with special rules just to handle the sheer number of media people there.
Wow. I can't imagine trying to be a juror in that environment. It'd be so hard to stay impartial with all those eyes on you.
It must have been incredibly difficult. There's no doubt that constant media attention had an effect on the whole thing. It just added this whole other layer of complexity to a case that was already unbelievably complicated.
It makes you think about how much the media's role has changed even since then. Social media, the internet, this constant stream of information. It's a whole different world now.
It really is. I mean, the Patty Hearst case, if it happened today, it would play out so differently because of social media, the speed of information, how things go viral, the sheer number of places reporting on it. It'd be fascinating and really pretty overwhelming.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder how that constant flow of information, all those opinions and instant commentary, how would that affect our ability to really think critically, to form our own judgments?
That's the million-dollar question in this day and age, isn't it? How do we filter out the noise? How do we figure out what's real and what's not? How do we avoid just being swept up by the loudest voices, the most sensational headlines? It's a challenge for all of us.
Definitely something to think about. But going back to Patty Hearst, you mentioned that she was eventually pardoned. Did that finally, put the controversy to rest?
Not really, no. In fact, the pardon itself caused a lot of debate. Some people said it was justified because her case was so unusual, but others felt strongly that she should have served out her whole sentence, that a pardon wasn't the right call.
So even after all these years, the trial, the prison time, the clemency, the pardon, there are still unanswered questions, right? There's still those lingering doubts, different opinions about Patty Hearst and what her part in all of this really was.
That's the heart of it, I think. The Patty Hearst case, it reminds us that there are rarely simple answers when it comes to people and why they do things, especially in these really extreme situations. It's a story that makes us think, challenges our assumptions, and shows us how blurry that line can be between being a victim and being someone who is responsible for their actions.
It's what makes this case so fascinating, even after all this time. For me, it's how this one story connects to these bigger anxieties we have about control, about manipulation, about the things that shape us as people.
And those are questions that don't really go away, do they? It also makes you think about our justice system itself and how we deal with cases where someone says they were forced to do something. How do we decide who's guilty and who's innocent when what's really on trial is the human mind itself? Those are tough questions.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's incredible how a case from over 50 years ago can still feel so relevant, so important today.
It speaks to the power of these stories, right? They remind us that history isn't just dates and facts in a book. It's about real people, real events. And the echoes of those events can stay with us for generations.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, we encourage you to keep thinking about this case, to look into the sources, to come to your own conclusions. The Patty Hearst story is a testament to the human spirit, both in how strong it can be and also the dark places it can go. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and keep searching for the truth wherever it may lead you.